Nope, I'm not special. Last one. I haven't done as much with this last one.
I found my pen, Phyllis.
Oh, you did?
You know where it was? Underneath the seat in my red car.
Oh, oh.
I was looking for something in the car, and it was underneath the seat. I said, okay. But you know, what I did was refuse to let myself be upset about it. I did. I said, you know, if I lost it, I hope somebody's enjoying using it.
That's right.
It didn't have any ink in it anyway. And I had decided I wasn't gonna buy another one. As my husband bought me a tennis bracelet, and I lost it 2 times, and I took it back. I lost my Mont Blanc pen. I paid $300 for the pen. Right, I couldn't find it, and I decided I wasn't going to be worried about it.
He said they're gonna
Whoever's using it,
Podium,
God
mic check,
bless
mic
them.
check, mic two, podium,
turn it
'Cause I
on.
mic check,
I
1
couldn't
2
find
1
it. I
2
looked
2 2
everywhere.
check check check
And I was
mic check
cleaning
1 2.
out, looking for something, and I started cleaning out the car, and it was under the seat, way back under the seat of my red car. I found it. And I was telling Phyllis that my husband brought me a beautiful tennis bracelet, but the clasp kept slipping, and I lost it
Let me
twice.
see that name.
Tennis bracelet that I had given her, and when she was in college,
Good afternoon. I will now call the special meeting of Suffolk Public School Board meeting open. Now we need a motion for the attendance by electronic device for Tyron Riddick.
Motion is needed pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.3, subsection B1, to allow Board Member Tyron Riddick to participate in tonight's special meeting of the school board through electronic communication means from his residence in Suffolk due to a temporary medical condition that prevents Board Member Riddick's physical attendance at tonight's meeting.
Have a motion?
I second the motion.
No, you have to give the motion.
Need someone to make the motion first.
I make a motion that we allow Board Member Riddick to join us via Zoom to our meeting tonight.
Second.
It has been properly moved and second. We're ready to vote. It was a dual second. It was Dr. Buck as well as Vice Chair Howell.
Board members, please vote. Motion passed.
Please allow him in. Are you able to hear us?
I'm in.
Okay. You can hear us now? Can you hear us, board members?
Yes. Have the YouTube playing as well, just in case math technology
You can hear us now?
buffers. Yes.
Now we will stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance by Board Member Byram.
Join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Board Member Byram. Now we will have a moment of silence. Thank you. Next on our agenda, we have new business, which is the Finance Committee meeting report, which I will be given. On January 31st, 2024, we had our first Finance Committee board meeting, which we had myself, Karen Jenkins, chair, and we had Board Member Slingloff, who attended. At first, we welcomed everyone from the Finance Committee, and we had an overview of the audit process for both activity funds and all other funds by Ms. Wendy Forsman, the Chief Financial Officer. She then introduced her staff, and we discussed audit processes and items required to give to the external auditors, description of federal, state, and compliance audits that happen annually in addition to the external auditors hired by the City of Suffolk. We then reviewed the results for the fiscal year 23 audit by Wendy Forsman, our Chief Financial Officer. The compliance section revealed no comments audits for both school activity funds and operating grant and food nutritional services. Both school bookkeepers and staff are to be commended for their hard work to make this happen, and finance and purchasing staff work hard every day to review and ensure that all items are in compliance and are properly authorized. An overview of the various financial statements as presented in the city annual comprehensive financial report on June 30th, 2023 by Mrs. Forsman, the Chief Financial Officer, using pages from the published City of Suffolk Annual Comprehensive Financial Report on June 30th. Explanations were given of each item appearing in the multiple sections of the book. Then we discussed reserve for health benefits, requests to the city for reimbursement of retiree claims costs by Mrs. Forsman, discussion and relationships to retiree claims, descriptions of meetings with the city took place. Excuse me. Oh, okay. Took place, and 74% of the needed to draw down $2 million to avoid increasing rates for current staff to pay for retiree claims. And then we had questions and comments by the members that were there and the superintendent. And the superintendent and the committee members praised for the efforts of the staff and agreed that the OPEB fund should be addressed. And that was our report. And now, moving forward, we will have the superintendent proposed budget for 2024-2025 school year. Dr. Gordon?
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. We're going to move to the podium. Ms. Forsman is going to join me as we review the proposed budget. I do want to make the public aware we've had successful 2x2s with all of our board members. Board Member Jenkins actually served in 2 of those meetings. Board Member Jenkins and Board Member Ribick asked several questions. Board Member Howell and Dr. Brittingham did not have any questions at the time. Dr. Brooksbuck and Ms. Slingleff also had several questions as we completed our last 2x2 yesterday. So we'll move forward and we'll come down to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Chair Jenkins, Vice Chair Howell, members of the board, and our school community. Before we get started, we do want to take the time to kind of review the overall timeline for everything moving forward. After we do our proposed budget here today, we will then have a public hearing on the budget at the March 14th regular school board meeting. Also during that board meeting, we will also ask the school board to set a special meeting in order to approve the budget. After the budget has been approved, the budget then goes to the City of Suffolk. I'm sure we will also have some discussions with the City of Suffolk doing a spring joint meeting that is tentatively being planned. The City of Suffolk has until May 15th per the Code of Virginia to be able to determine how much money they're going to appropriate to the school division. As soon as that occurs, we will then ask for another special meeting for the school board to be able to adopt the budget. 48 to 72 hours after the school board has adopted the budget, contracts will then go out to all staff. It's going to be our goal to try to have all of our contracts wrapped up by the time we get out for the Memorial Day holiday. All right, so I want to start with the overall timeline and the budget process overview. We actually start almost right around the first day of school, and it begins the conversation with our building level principals as they begin to have faculty meetings and conversations with their staff to determine wants versus needs based on what is in their school improvement plans, as well as feedback that they've received from central office. We then expand this to the school-based staff to take for the next 2 months in September and October. And this is when a lot of cross conversations occur from Dr. Bird's team and School Leadership and Innovation. Dr. Lee and Dr. Pichon follow up with the principals. We begin to determine what is top priorities. And then we also ask the school board for initiatives. This actually occurred where all school board members had to provide their goals or their priorities for the budget by December 14th. And then we have 2 public hearings, 2 opportunities for the public to chime in December 2023, as well as the upcoming one on March 14th. Once we have kind of compiled that information, we begin to look for common themes. And we also want to make sure that our directors and coordinators during that month of November begin to kind of see if anything is reoccurring based on preliminary data, as well as carryovers to make sure it actually aligns with the strategic plan. For the next 2 months is when the chiefs and myself kind of get together and we look at the breakdown per level. We looked at estimated costs. We looked at things that were actually coming off of our grant fund with CARES Act. We look at things that we weren't able to do last year as an example. That takes place in December and January, which kind of leads us to today for our budget proposal in February. As I just mentioned, we had successful 2x2s with all of our board members, but we also gave the exact same budget overview to all 21 of our schools over the last 5 to 7 days. So I want to talk a little bit about CARES Act because the funding cliff is here. CARES Act 3, the funding cliff is September 30th of 2024. And this one is different. As we know, this was a 3-year process for ESSERs 1, 2, and 3, but we also had to take a look at re-benchmarking. The standards of quality changes every time the General Assembly gets together. We also had a composite index change, where the composite index for the city of Suffolk, which originally was right around 0.314, about 35 cents on the dollar, dropped down to about 3.3491, which when you're talking about approximately a $200 million budget, that could potentially be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And since COVID has hit, and even though we're post-COVID, inflation is still an impact. These are some of the things that we took a hard look at to make sure that our staff was going to be able to fill any increases in their salaries in order to be able to battle the actual cost of living. So I want to make sure our school community, even though our school board members are familiar with this slide and our staff is familiar with this slide, I want to make sure our school community is aware and take a hard look in the bottom right-hand corner at the key. Those items that you see in black are the items that we will be moving off of the CARES Act and on to our operating budget. This is part of the reason why our operating budget is going to increase. As you know, 63 teacher assistants was something that the board voted on last fall when we were still $2 million short for our budget. It was going to be our goal to be able to add S3 positions in order to be able to take duties and responsibilities off of teachers' plates. We also knew that we had to have additional professional learning for the Virginia Literacy Act. And our overall total numbers of students that are in 504 plans, as well as the doubling of our English language learners, are some of the key things that we wanted to do to impact student achievement. What you see in red is what we are going to move on to the all-in plan. You'll see a slide where we have $5.8 million to be spent over 2 years. Dr. Branch and Mr. Wagner did a presentation for the board a short while ago, and we all were in alignment in agreeing the need to continue Saturday Academy. But when the all-in plan began after the school year started, principals and leadership teams and instructional staff had to work to develop a plan for before, during, and after school tutoring. Those two components are things that we will carry over as a part of the all-in plan. And what you see in blue are things that we're still looking for some additional funding sources. Telemental health, the recruitment and retention stipends. Dr. Avery and I had a conversation the other day where we think we have a solution in order to be able to continue that. The recruitment and retention stipends were for some of our tough-to-fill positions, such as science, math, and special education. And we also had expanded the communities and schools programs. It's been a great hit. Great work done by Dr. Hope Sinclair, the executive director. We really have had a nice footprint of that in the Kings Fork High School feeder program. So those are some of the things that we want to focus on, including our Chromebook replacement devices that I'm going to talk a little bit more about on the next slide. So I do want to take some time to pause and clarify some information when it comes to the CARES Act timeline. As Ms. Forsman and I took the opportunity to go to a recent city council meeting to ask for money to be reappropriated. As you see here, CARES Act actually started in April 2021. It's when the state superintendent announced this with memo 110-21. A month later, we had a public hearing at a regular school board meeting to get feedback from the board as well as the community on the use of those funds. School board then approved our application that was then sent to the state. This is almost 3 years ago. City council then approved this same application and those funds and the reasons for those funds 2 months later in October of 2021. And then after, anytime there's any money that is left over from ordering things, mainly for supply chain issues, you then have to have the money reallocated, reappropriated over 2 fiscal years, which is something similar that occurred in December of 2021 when the school board actually approved the budget adjustment once that money was appropriated, once the grant was approved. Now, the money that comes in always has to go to the locality. And anytime you have money that's being spent over 2 fiscal years, it's very similar to what we do with fund balance money, when we always go back to the city at every August or every September and specifically spell out what the money is going to be used for. This CARES Act money that we were using was going to be for Chromebook replacement. Before CARES Act, our Chromebook replacement was on a 5 to 7 year cycle. Because of the support from CARES Act, we were allowed to keep up with technology and shorten it down to 3 to 5 years. It was also there to replace the roofs. Because of value engineering and other cuts that have occurred when it comes to our capital improvement project, we had too many of our roofs that had shingles on them. Roofs that have shingles have a tendency to leak. So we were replacing those with metal roofs. Those were the things that we actually took to City Council about a week and a half or so ago. But for some reason, even though this timeline was there seemed to be some level of confusion. See, the school board had already approved this. The City Council had already approved this. So anytime that we have to go back, it's because money is always being spent over multiple fiscal years. And then because this was approved by a vote of 8-0 by the City Council, it is now going to be on the March 14th agenda for the school board to have that budget adjustment. That's the cycle. The City Council approves the money, the school board then adopts and makes an adjustment to the budget. That's the way we always have to do things anytime there's changes of money that spans over 2 fiscal years. So I just wanted to take some time to clarify that because there seemed to be some confusion about a week and a half ago. All right, so our common themes and focus is investments. These are the things that we actually informed the board last year that was going to be a multi-year project, right? And we all know that the safety of our students and staff is always going to be our top priority. Our second priority is actually raises and pay. This is something that's been a goal and a vision when the school board hired me on October 14th of 2019. One of the first things I said to those school board members was, we have to do something right now about how we're compensating our staff or we will lose them to other localities. Because of the Virginia Literacy Act, there's a huge focus on student growth and literacy. That's part of the reason why you saw some professional learning mentioned on the previous slide. And several of our board members had also mentioned the need to be able to expand early childhood. See, this is more like a research paper when we see those common themes from schools, school community, the staff, and the school board, while also making sure that we tie things into our strategic plan. When we have multiple facets of that have been highlighted, those are the things that become our common themes for our budget. So let's talk about safety, and this is always going to be ongoing. This is under the leadership of Dr. Rodney Brand, our Chief of Administrative Services. We have made a conscious effort to add additional metal detectors. This was also a recommendation that came from our School Safety Audit Committee, one of the citizen advisory committees of the board. Dr. Brand and his team and me, we actually many times have actually viewed the entrance of students into school and how they leave. The more metal detectors that we have means that the more lines that we can actually create at the front of our schools and during the bus loop. The more lines we have, the shorter amount of time it takes for kids to get in, which then equals less instructional time being missed for safety. We also work very hard for our grant-funded cameras and bell systems. John Littlefield, our great director of technology, who had to work all day on some adjustments for virtual board member being able to join us, writes a grant every year that actually allows us to have about 3 to 4 years, 3 to 4 schools each year to upgrade their camera systems, to upgrade their bell systems. So you can kind of average that about every 5 years we will have new cameras in our schools as long as we can get the grant, because that grant is actually for the whole state, and the state divides it up based on how many schools you have and the amount of money that was actually given the previous year. The big focus of last year was our 28 S3, safety, security, and support. We were thrilled when we finally got the $2 million from the city in November. And once we got that $2 million, we began to apply that. Our principals began to interview those folks when we posted the jobs beginning in January. We're going to continue to try to add additional of those positions until we have all 28, and depending on which budget is actually adopted by the state, we might be able to add more. As a part of our safety approach, you know I'm a big believer in a layered safety approach. And I'm going to give this disclaimer right now. I will never, ever, once again, tell everyone everything that we do for school safety in our schools. We do not want to have anyone try to poke holes in that. But we can announce that we're going to make an adjustment and enhancement to our Raptor system with the RAVE app. The RAVE app will actually allow all of our staff that has cell phones to download the app. There's actually an emergency or a panic button on there that sends a direct response to the Suffolk Police Department and other members of emergency services. You won't even have to call 911 with this. We're about to close this deal on our enhanced camera capabilities. There's actually software that's going to be installed on our camera systems at our schools. In every school shooting, unfortunately, that has occurred, at some point in time, the assailant brandished the gun or brandished the knife. This new software that we're going to purchase actually will detect that and send an emergency notification to the Suffolk Police Department. That's going to be something that we want to be able to install immediately. And I also want to give kudos to Dr. Brown, who found a grant that was going to allow us to add a security specialist position. This grant-funded position is going to take a look at the analytics of safety. So I was going to be able to step in to provide additional support. We'll also be another member of Dr. Brown's team, so everything doesn't always have to fall on Dr. Brown and Dave LaFave. The more people that we have involved in safety is always going to be best. And this time, you have another body there that actually will visit all of our schools to make sure that our protocols are being followed. We're going to go into some details about the all-in grant that I mentioned from Governor Youngkin. Tutoring, attendance, and literacy are the three main components, and that includes in-person and virtual for tutoring. We also, as I mentioned previously, use this money to allow us to continue Saturday Academy. Saturday Academy happens about every other week, right? Every 2 weeks. And we actually extended that calendar this year to make sure that it goes a little bit deeper into April to make sure that our kids are prepared for the May SOLs. Dr. Branch just recently awarded John F. Kennedy Middle School with $1,000 because we wanted to be able to incentivize schools that send the most kids to tutoring. I think Kings Fork Middle School was second and received $500. And this also includes being able to pay our staff an attractive wage to stay after school or come in before school to do that tutoring. As I mentioned, everything really does come back to the Virginia Literacy Act, making sure that our staff has experience when it comes to the science of reading. So literary coaches and programs are going to be a huge part of that. As a reminder to our board and to our school community, several times the state will have mandates that must occur, but they're not funded. So us being able to use the all-in grant for that gives us more flexibility to have that additional support for literacy. And as you know, about 3 years ago, we revised our summer school model because we no longer call it summer school, we call it summer series. We have the SOL Academy for those students that need to pass an SOL in order to be able to get back on track for graduation or to graduate that summer. We have our traditional summer school model where students can take 2 classes, one old, one new, to get them on track or maybe even potentially get them ahead, which seems to be a little bit more of an attractive piece with the 4x4 schedule. And of course, our SBS enrichment with things such as SBS Explore being led by Katrina Carey, our coordinator of history and social studies, where we've actually taught our students about the history of Suffolk with different QR codes at important sites around the city. All right, so we're going to take some time here to talk about the current budget that is in place. That's the governor's budget that actually came out right around the time that we got out for winter break. The governor's budget calls for a 1% bonus, right? A 1% bonus. Now, a bonus is good because it does allow people to have immediate money in your pocket, but a bonus does not count towards the Virginia retirement system, and a bonus does not do anything about changing your step for the following year. We're doing something a little bit different because we believe that our folks should get a step raise, and that's something you're going to see in our proposed budget. A reminder, as you see that asterisk there at the bottom, employees at the top of the scale will receive a 1% bonus if the governor's budget is adopted. So we have built this budget based on what Governor Youngkin had originally put out. This is before Budget Sunday occurred when there was a House version of the budget that came out as well as a Senate version. So let's take a look at this step raise based on Governor Youngkin's budget, all right? You can see that we have an increase in our proposed teacher salary scale, not professional scale. We're going up with a starting salary of $54,060, right? And the new ceiling is $87,901. You'll also notice that Ms. Forsman and I were strategic and specific about putting that date right there beside that, because this could change. This could change if we get more money. So we're going to call this the minimum case scenario. And as our staff has been extremely complimentary of the work that Ms. Forsman's team has done and the feedback we've received from the principals, you can see here that we have kept our promise. Our staff has gotten a raise every year under this current administration. An increase in 5 years of 20%. 20%. That's really strong. This is also part of the reason why some of our neighbors began to change their scales, because now Suffolk became more attractive. We try to make sure that we're going to stay in the top 4 or 5 when it comes to our teacher salary scale. looking at a 1% to 1.75% increase. When Ms. Forsman met with the salary scale committee when we first put this together a couple of years ago, the committee was very adamant that the staff that has been here the longest, the teachers that have been here the longest, should get the highest raises. The next group, the middle, right around 1.5, and those that are relatively new, right around 1%. Bus drivers, we know that we have to be able to keep people there to help Mr. Privet out and to get our kids to school. So we're also going to increase that starting salary to $18.36. This year, we're adding a step raise of 1% for them. Now, again, take a look. We also increased that transportation scale every year. Bus drivers in 5 years have had a 39.3% increase. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal, and that's part of the reason why Mr. Privet has been very comfortable of saying that we're close to fully staffed and somebody may go out sick. Or we're close to fully staffed and somebody may go out on FMLA. But now we also have substitutes that are potentially available to help fill those routes, which would then allow us to eliminate a lot of the double routes that we see at the elementary level. To all of our transportation workers, we're going to increase your salary one more time with a starting salary of $18.36. For support and administration, also 1% to 1.5%. And we want to make sure we're going to be consistent with that. We feel that administration, our professional scale and staff should be consistent in their raises. Now, I do want to point out for our support staff, however, we also are making a jump there by increasing the minimum wage to $15.41. Now, you all know last year, we actually were ahead of the game because in 2025, the new minimum wage is $15 an hour. That's mandatory. But we did that last year with $15.11. So we're going up again to $15.41. We are excited that our clerical staff actually feels, and some of our support staff actually feels like they are now officially making a living wage. So I mentioned Budget Sunday, and that occurred last Sunday. We believe that we now are going to have a greater chance of having a larger raise than what I just gave you on that minimum case scenario. The current House and Senate proposals are right around 3%. One's at 3%, the other one's at 3.38. So we believe that the minimum increase now is going to be 3%. If that goes through, and from everything that we're being told, and we have a visit to the General Assembly tomorrow with some of our students, if that goes through, then we are going to believe that we'll be able to do a lot of the things that sometimes we've been able to had to put off. But I do want to point out to the board that a lot of our increases that you're seeing in the overall budget comes from those things that are moving over from CARES Act, and the other part comes from being able to give our staff the raise. So if this occurs, it would be a step, helps out for that Virginia retirement system right there, plus a 2% cost of living increase. That takes care of the inflation. We want our staff here in Suffolk Public Schools, we want our SPS family to actually be able to see a difference in their checks every year. That's the goal. Several of our board members and having conversations with Dr. Pichon and having conversations with all 11 of our elementary school principals, we know that we needed to increase our early childhood allotment. When Dr. Pichon opened up the early childhood applications, 400 applications in 4 days. As of this past Monday, that number had increased to 506. So we want to add a new pre-K classroom, which will give us 20 more slots. And that's going to be 20 more slots in the actual funding that we get from the state. So we're putting that onto the operating budget as well. 20 more slots, which will also include an additional teacher, also will include an additional teacher assistant. Now, I do want to share with the board and share with our school community, it's going to be our long-term goal to have a preschool center here in SPS. And we want to make that centrally located. If we are able to have a preschool center or an early childhood center, this also will help us to create more classroom space at our schools, since all 11 of our elementary schools have early childhood programs. This also will help us dealing with any growth that may come throughout the city instead of just one concentrated area. So I have to talk the historical perspective here on the return on investment. Because as I told you all last year, and I think we've done a pretty good job of coming through with this is a multi-year plan. And the multi-year plan aligns perfectly with the new strategic plan. When it comes to our ROI, our return on investment, and we're talking about safety, you all have seen the data from Dr. Brown that we've had a decrease in discipline referrals, right? Next month is the month that sometimes we see a spike for some reason. It happens every year in March. But overall, our referrals have went down because of our restorative practice, because of our PBIS, because of our morning meetings, because of the proactive approach that we've had, and the fact that we now have more adults in the building, SSOs, S3s, behavioral specialists. We've added different layers to make sure that our kids and our staff have all the support that they need. We've also added additional teachers. You all knew when we opened up the Center for Performing and Production Arts, there was going to be a new pathway added every year. We will have to do that again next year, right? I think the goal is going to be to have 4 different pathways for our kids in CPPA. And we wanted to expand our JRTC program with the Navy JRTC. I explained to you all last year, there's going to be our goal to eventually treat our JRTC programs very similar to what we do with our specialty center programs of IB, 2 Project Lead the Ways of biomedical and engineering, and the CPPA. And we need to have an additional instructional technology resource teacher, new software, new programs, new ideas, and the focus on artificial intelligence. These are the reasons why we need to have a new ITRT added to the budget. We had additional ISS monitors to make sure that all of our elementary schools were no longer using TAs, that we had ISS monitors in each one of those schools. That was mainly just for consistency. And the annual increase in staff salaries. We're right around 84% to 85% retention rate every year. And we think that that increase in salaries is part of one reasons why folks are staying here. The folks that you have seen that have left our school division, we got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people came in at the same time. Which means a lot of people retire at the same time. And because of what's happening over the world, we've had a transient population with our military staff and their families. These things have occurred, and then life also happens with a lot of sick relatives that folks that have then had to become the caregiver. Those are some of the things that we're seeing, but we do know, based on the feedback we've seen in our climate surveys, that the raises have made a difference. I've already talked about the increase in early childhood education. But I do want to remind everyone about the work that occurred for the 22-23 school year. This 95% division accreditation, as I said, we have about 100 school divisions that would change place with us. And we know that we still have some work to do when it comes to our school improvement plans, right? We understand the impact of making sure that our things actually occur. But we also know that the work that's being led by Dr. Branch, Dr. Lawson Davenport, and Dr. Bird's team is the reason why we've had the 5th highest growth in the state. We're not going to allow anyone to take that away from us. But what we are going to do is be able to build on that every year with a huge focus on students with disabilities. And you saw this with the $33.9 million of scholarships the class of 2023 had. It's going to be hard for the class of 2024 to top that. We think that might have been the highest in SPS history. We also had a request from several board members, specifically Mr. Riddick, about a Grow Your Own program, where we're happy to know that we actually got the application approved for the I Teach program. The I Teach program will allow many of our staff that has a bachelor's degree, or many of our teacher assistants that want to work their way up to become a teacher, to get tuition reimbursement of $3,050 in order to take courses. Tuition reimbursement is something that we want to be able to continue, and we're happy that there was an application out there for us to be able to do that. And if you will also remember, we had a student that came here from Lakeland High School who wanted to have the teacher cadet program at Lakeland High School. That resonated with us. So kudos to Dr. Lawson Davenport and her work with Kaplan. We now have a program that we're going to start called Educators Rising that's going to revamp our teacher cadet program. And this is going to occur at all 3 of our high schools beginning next year. Dr. Lane, who used to be our state superintendent, is actually the CEO of PDK, and he's been working with Mr. Skinner and Dr. Lawson Davenport to make sure the curriculum aligns, including aligning it with SOL standards. Our next level is to make sure that our kids can be able to earn dual enrollment credits off of that. So we're going to attack this teacher shortage from multiple avenues. As I've shared with you all plenty of times before, I am not a believer in there's one solution to an issue. You always have to have multiple solutions because our kids have multiple needs. So having the Educators Rising program, as well as I Teach, we think is going to be the thing that's going to allow us to close that teacher shortage. And we're going to continue to lock in those kids. I'm going to do it again this year at graduation. We're going to give out those letters of intent. And we'll know if it works in about 3 years because I gave out ones 2 years ago. So we'll see if they come back here to SPS. My final slide before I turn this over to Ms. Forsman. This is what we're going to ask the city for, okay? For our safety, security, and support, we're going to ask for $3 million. We need $3 million to make this entire plan work. $3 million added to our operating budget. This is for our raises. This is for the entire plan. And I want to be clear with the board as well as with our school community. If we do not get the $3 million, we cannot just eliminate one thing. We have to take a percentage away from everything. That's the best way to be equitable with it. We also are going to ask for $1 million for sinkhole repairs. That's actually on the low end because we've spent over $2 million this year already. Now, the sinkhole repairs, normally we may have put that under our preventive maintenance budget. But as a reminder to our school community, our preventive maintenance budget over the next 5 years is what's funding the expansion project at Northern Shores Elementary School. So there is no preventative maintenance budget. But Ms. Forsman's team and Mr. Napier have been very creative of taking a look at year-end funds to be able to get things done since we do not have that money. Now, I do want to say here, for the sinkhole repairs for $1 million, I think it would be a great idea if our city used the speed cameras, the revenue from that, to take care of this. These speed camera zones are occurring in front of our schools. The fund is actually used for safety. Sinkholes on school property is a safety issue. It's a safety issue. So we have options here. They can either potentially use the money or the line item from that to take care of it, or we can send them the bill. Because we can't continue to be sustainable and do the things that we need to at our schools if we're having sinkhole repair issues. Remember, the school itself, the property itself is graded by contractors. We don't actually take over the school until substantial completion has occurred and the keys are given to us. When we're having sinkholes at schools that are relatively new, like Colonel Fred Cherry, we know there's an issue. And we've all seen the trouble and challenges that we had at John F. Kennedy Middle School, which is part of the reason why that school is being rebuilt now. So we want to have a discussion with this at the city, hopefully at our joint meeting, but also during some other committees. We think that the funds from the speed cameras can fulfill our request for $1 million just for sinkholes. At this time, I'm going to turn over to Ms. Forsman, who's going to go into the details of the proposed budget.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm going to do the dollars and cents. So you can see here from this first slide that our actual expenses last year were $215,341,540. Our current revised budget is $227.7 million, and the proposed budget is $242.7 million, which is a 6.59 increase. The operating fund is a 4.29 increase, and the food services 8.09, whereas the grants fund is the largest one at 21.64. As Dr. Gordon said, the governor's proposed budget brought us $6 million. And these are the highlights of the governor's budget. 1% salary retention bonus for $653,000. That bonus is $2 million. Basic aid, the net change from the 22-24 biennium to the 24-26 biennium is a whopping $842,000. If you remember, they put compensation supplement in the last biennium budget to make the raises happen. Well, all that rolls into basic aid and in the new biennium, which is why it is only different by the $842,000. They reduced sales tax, which I'm very happy they did because their estimates were way too high. And they also have reduced our regional tuition over the last 3 years. It was a high, we were getting, it's $3.2 million. Next year, we're slated for under $1 million reimbursement for CSEP, which cost us approximately $4 million a year. The state has taken that money and divided it over all school divisions, not just those with a CSEP program. So it makes it very difficult for us to continue to have that program rise in cost and not have reimbursement from the state for those additional costs. In addition, SOQs, as you know, when they re-benchmark, those costs increase, and so they've increased those programs by those re-benchmark costs. So for the total budget, the state increase is $6 million. The city request is $4 million, but if you look at the budget book, it doesn't show that. It shows $8.1 million. Well, the reason for that is, in the revised column of the budget book, there is $1.6 million that is one-time reappropriated from last year to current year for buses. So you have to remove that. And then in addition, because we don't charge for summer school and we don't have some other revenue that we used to get for tuitions and things, we reduced our revenue by that $230,000 that we no longer get. So the actual increase to the budget is $8.1 million. This is how the revenue shakes out for the operating fund only, obviously. The state revenue is 61.14%. The city is 38%. That's about normal for us, the 61 and 38% split. But then you can see other funds, which are things like refunds and rebates, rentals, things like that, sale of textbooks, those kinds of things are your other funds. And then federal revenue is things like your JROTC program reimbursement. You get reimbursement for part of that program. Impact aid, Medicaid reimbursement, all goes in that $1,092,000. When we look at all funds and how we spend those funds by categories, and these are the categories as defined by the state, you can see that 74.3% is instruction and instructional support, or $179.6 million. I would like to point out again that administration is still only 2% of the budget. It's not a large number of the budget. Technology is 4%, food services runs around 4%, facilities and maintenance is almost 10%, and people transportation runs at almost 4.5%. When we look at by these categories, what has increased, we thought it was important to add the slide this year so you could see that the majority of the increase of money, and remember this is all funds, including grant fund, you can see the majority of the increase is right there in instruction. Now, 5.8 of that, I want to point out, is the all-in funds, right, that we talked about from the state for 2 years. Then you can see the small amounts. Transportation is a negative because, again, you have to remove that $1.6 million in buses. So really, that's a $700,000 increase if you remove that out to compare apples to apples. Facilities and maintenance went up by 2.8, but 1 million of that is the sinkholes that we're asking for. And again, it doesn't have to be in our operating budget depending on how the city appropriates that money. But we have to account for it somewhere if we're going to ask for it. And so that's where we put it, in purchase services under facilities maintenance building services. Food services is up by $773,958, primarily due to the raise, and food costs have skyrocketed. And then technology has $1 million there, and the $1 million increase is about $700,000 worth of software increases because of inflation and what came from the CARES Act to the operating fund to help keep us with the virtual environment and running things that were on the CARES Act as listed on the CARES Act slide. And then there's also about $100,000 worth of equipment additions that need to happen for equipment that's out of date. Our compensation and benefits makes up, again, almost 85% of our budget. So 85% of the entire budget is made up by salaries and benefits. And we don't set the benefit rates, as you know, that's set by the VRS and the state. So you can see that that is a huge amount of our budget. For additional positions that Dr. Gordon has put in his budget here, we have one dean that we're going to add to John F. Kennedy Middle School. Of course, the one pre-K teacher that we're going to add to Booker T. Washington. We're picking up, of the 63 CARES Act teacher assistants, we're picking up 33 of them in the operating fund. 42 were hired. There were 63 additional, 42 at this moment have been hired. 33 are what we're picking up in the operating fund, and the others will come through attrition. Teacher assistant for the pre-K classroom that we're adding. Then we have, as you know, we've been on a plan to convert our permanent part-time teacher assistant and custodial positions to full-time positions. And so we moved 3.4 of those permanent part-time positions into full-time. We're also reviewing the SPED liaisons and the SPED lead teachers, and we're going to be determining a plan that we hope to be budget neutral for that group of people to provide that SPED liaison at every single school. And so the total positions is 39.4. So how do the personnel investments equal up? You got step raises for $1.1 million. Substitute cost. Now, this is not long-term subs. This is not vacancies. This is actual substitutes on a day-to-day basis. The cost of that has risen, and the amount that we're using has risen, that we need to add $1.4 million to the budget to cover those costs. The teacher assistants for CARES coming over, $1.3 million. Part-time overtime went up $386,000, mostly due to shortages in staffing where we can't get staff to work extra or to come extra, and so we're having to add to that. Coaching stipends are for additional assistant coaches, and also at the middle school level, we've added a stipend for a person that handles those activities at the middle school level, because those activities have grown tremendously. And then the three additional positions that we talked about, the three teaching positions, the three additional positions we talked about, which is the teacher assistant for the pre-K classroom, the teacher for the pre-K classroom, and the teacher. The dean, excuse me, not the dean teacher, the dean. So personnel investment, the total personnel investment you can see here is almost $4.6 million of the 8.1. When we go to operational investments, you'll see here purchase services is increasing by 3.1. And here are the top reasons. In the general ed program, you will see the Virtual Virginia, you will see the purchase services went up because Virtual Virginia is in that purchase service. It's a purchase service. When we have to pay Virtual Virginia for students to take those classes, it's a purchase service. Special education, contracting therapy services where we can't hire therapists enough to handle all those students that need the therapy. We're having to hire that out as a contract. That's a contract service or a purchase service for $680,000. Gifted has dual enrollment increase, which is wonderful because the amount of kids taking dual enrollment is increasing, so we have to increase that tuition. Instructional support, the graduation venue is $17,000 higher. We have an actuary report every other year that is due for our other post-employment benefits. The cost of that is going to run us $30,000 next year. Transportation for special ed students is up $251,500. I think I've spoken to you before about the extreme cost of that and how we've purchased 3 vehicles to start transporting some of those students to save us that $17,000 a week it's costing us to transport some of those students. Facilities and maintenance went up almost $1.3 million. $1 million of that is the sinkholes. Ground services went up $10,000. The cost of the SROs, the cost we reimburse the city to have the SROs that we currently have, went up by $200,000. District field trips were increasing by $25,000 because a cost of charter buses and things that do those field trips that we pay for, it just wasn't covering the cost anymore. Professional development went up a small amount by $1,948. Utilities on a 3-year average had to add almost $600,000 to that line in order to cover cost. Our insurance is going to increase by $13,000. As you know, we added a pharmacy, and we have to cover the cost of the insurance to insure the pharmacy inventory only. So we're insuring the inventory, and that cost is $13,000 a year. Dues and subscriptions went up modestly, as you can see here. Materials and supplies and materials includes software and science consumable materials, and that went up $533,000. Food for the pre-K program went up $33,000. Vehicle fuel to keep our buses and White Fleet on the road, $450,000. As you know, the cost of fuel has just not come down, and so our average has to go up. Uniforms, $18,000. The cost of uniforms is higher. School allocations, we've added an attendance bonus each month for schools as part of that allocation, so $15,000. You can see here we've had to add $285,000 more to the expense side of the budget to cover what we believe is going to be the cost of CSEP next year. And then there's that $100,000 I talked about with the equipment that's out of date that has to be replaced. E-rate, we're increasing by $21,000, but E-rate comes in as revenue, and you have the same expense. So it's a budget neutral, but it is an expense that's higher, so I listed it here. Then we have to subtract some things because they went down. The buses that were reappropriated in this current year won't happen next year, so you take that back out. Travel and training went down by $46,188, primarily in high school, in the high school level, because they didn't need the money anymore. They had a specialized training last year. They won't need, or this year, that they won't need next year, and that money was moved over to some athletics for helmet reconditioning and some things that we needed there. Advertising went down slightly. We're doing a lot more electronic advertising. Don't need as many ads in the paper. Leases and rentals went down very slightly. The total increase is $3.5 million. If you add the two together, you get to the $8.1 million that we've been talking about. And we want to take just a few minutes and have some other discussion items because I think it's important for the public to hear and for this board to understand how the budget's set up. It's in the budget book, but I really want to point this out to you. The total operating budget is $198.1 million. Salary and benefits make up $167.8 million of that, which leaves only $30 million, and that sounds like a big number, but only $30 million to keep our schools open and to do all the maintenance that needs to happen. And when we look at that $30 million, here are the top items. And you can see here very clearly that purchase services, utility cost, materials and software, CSEP, vehicle fuel parts, textbooks, school allocations, insurance, equipment, and travel are the highest items. Purchase services are things like the maintenance contracts on the copiers, the maintenance contracts on all the HVAC units, on the controls that run those units, on the hoods that are over all the ovens and stoves in the cafeterias. It's the skyfold doors at some of the elementary schools that have to have a maintenance. We have to have those inspected every year. It's bleacher inspections. It's playground inspections. It's all kinds of maintenance items that have to be done in order to keep the schools running. As you can see, if you start adding this up, you see very quickly that $15 or so million of it is just to keep schools open. It isn't about materials, it's really about keeping the schools open. Utilities, keeping buses on the road, those kinds of things. It's not about a ton of money that we have for maintenance. So now we'll entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Your presentation was very detailed. You can tell that you gave us the opportunity to let you know what we desired. You put in what we definitely needed here for Suffolk Public Schools. You're thinking about the safety. You're thinking about the students, their learning, and taking care of our staff, who I'm very, very proud of. And Mrs. Forsman, I can't say enough about your work and your team. You put this together. You have the numbers. I don't even know how you sleep at night with the numbers going on through your head. Thank you and your staff so much. And Dr. Gorton, what you do is totally exceptional, and you cannot do that without your team. So I just want to thank all of you. And just to know that the money, you're telling us the money that we need, and we do have to go to the city. So I know a lot of city council, probably the mayor's watching this meeting. And so I know you're excited and proud to be able to put this money forward for our students, for our staff. So we can fund the biggest employer here in the city of Suffolk, which is Suffolk Public Schools, because you all are dictating what the future brings for our kids. And they can't, if we don't get the money, we don't have the safety part, we don't have the ability to teach them with a world-class education. We need you all to buy into this, because this is not money that we're wasting. It's money that we need, and we need even more. But this is what you all have put together. So thank you so much. I know that there are probably some questions. So I'm going to start with Board Member Riddick first. Do you have any questions? Well, let's do two questions first.
Madam Chair, I have questions. I don't have my budget book, so I will definitely email my question.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Barham?
I just want to ditto on what you said. Tremendous job, Ms. Forsman, your staff, and Dr. Gordon and his staff with coming up with these things. I appreciate the superintendent listening to the board as well, because I think everything I mentioned in my report to the clerk when she asked for budget and, information is included. And that tells that he's listening to the board. He's also listening to the stakeholders and other people who come with ideas to our school, and I commend him for that. Every one of us knows that our personal budgets have increased tremendously over the last couple of years and months. I know mine has. I used to say, I'm going to allocate this amount for food. Now it's about double that, right? Utilities, double that. Everything. We see our own personal budgets. So when we look at these figures, you know, it's tremendous to take in for me even, and I've been doing this for 16 years. But I can understand what we're dealing with. You know, everybody's dealing with the same problem. We have to increase to be able to offer the same quality and level of service for everyone in our city. We don't want to just offer it to one section of our city. We want everyone to benefit from this. And Dr. Gordon, I commend you for saying that. We want everyone to benefit. One of my things that I've always stressed is early childhood education. Dr. Pichon, you know that. I think that is very important. That's a strong investment for our city. I have seen the fruits of that through many students over the years, and I think if we actually studied the data on that, we would see that those students are some of those that got that $33.9 million in scholarships because we invested early with those children, and then we keep investing with them by new programs that we have presented in our school system over the years, and now we are reaping those benefits. We cannot regress. We cannot regress, let up on the pedal any, because we are seeing the benefits now. And I commend you on including all of those things in your budget. And, you know, I say to the city, we're asking for an increase of about $4 million. Is that correct? I say to them, we need this, and you are justifying why we need this. And the city and the parents of this city should demand this. As far as where we get money for the sinkholes, that's a wonderful idea, Dr. Gordon, that we take or ask the city that you give us some of the money that you have collected, 5, 6 million, whatever they've collected for these traffic tickets they're giving out. Invest that in the safety of our facilities. You know, that's an excellent idea. I commend you for all of these things. Thank you. Don't mean to be too long.
Board Member Slingloff.
Thank you very much for all the time that you've put in for this presentation and gathering of this information. I can only imagine the tedious work that this is, so I am grateful for all that you and your staff have been doing. A couple quick questions. There's a lot in here to digest, so I don't have a lot of deep questions tonight. But I would like to know if I'm looking at this budget here, and I've noticed with regards to the general education overall, last year for the revised budget, there were 756 teachers, full-time teachers that were allocated for this year, 757. So there's one more that's been added in for this year. How many of those positions do we have filled right now out of the 756 that were allocated last year? Or
So,
in
Ms.
other
Lingman, that
words,
number, yeah, that number literally changes about every 3 weeks. We have about 113 total teacher vacancies, but all of those classes have been filled by the long-term subs, which is part of the reason why you saw Ms. Forsman add that item on there about the overall increase to substitutes. And if you remember, I can't remember if you were on the board at the time or not, but we were very strategic about paying our long-term subs $232 a day, which is the highest in the region, so that we can pull subs from all over. The downside of that is when you have a high number of that because of the teacher shortage, sometimes you end up outspending that area and you have to have that increase. So right now, Dr. Avery's team just came from a job fair. They have another one. We already have some teachers that are locked in for next year. We have not closed this pool for this year. We will close it right around spring break to cut it off for anyone else that's still trying to join us for this year. But that number, we believe, will be reduced next year, especially if we're able to secure that teacher salary increase that we had on the slide.
another question with regards to purchase services, and I actually have 2 more questions just so you can, right off the top. With the purchase services, I see that's almost tripled. Can you explain to me what that entails, what is being budgeted for in that number?
Sure. As I mentioned, that number has $1 million of that is just for sinkholes. Because remember,
On
we
the,
have to have a
the
certain
general
place.
education,
In
I'm
general
talking- in
education?
instruction.
Oh, and you're still just there, okay,
Yeah, I'm
sorry.
still,
I went to the total.
I'm on that page right
No,
now.
that's okay. So for general education, remember the virtual Virginia 600, I think it was $650,000? That's in that line.
Okay. Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. And then, can you explain the difference for me? Travel and training, I see for the instructional that that has been consistently decreased for, it looks like for elementary, middle, and high school, if I'm correct, just glancing. What are we taking out of that travel and training? Is that predominantly travel? Is it actual training? Because I know that there's also the professional learning allocation, and I don't quite understand the differences in there, so if you can explain that to me, I'd appreciate it.
So we made a conscious effort to actually bring more speakers to us, bring more professional learning to us instead of sending people to as many conferences. Now, we do have travel lines for each school, including having separate administrative lines, because we want them to get their professional learning at their national conferences, at their state conferences. But we've also brought speakers in. We just recently brought in a speaker to talk about artificial intelligence at our last professional learning day that Mr. Littlefield and Dr. Lawson Davenport kind of helped to lead. So it's a delicate balance being spent, but the actual professional learning, we actually get more bang for our buck, because when we bring a speaker here, we can actually have more people in the room than sending them and not having to pay for the hotel costs as well.
Okay, so when you bring someone, does that fall under the professional learning allocation? Is that where that's at?
No.
Okay,
Sorry. The professional learning allocation, every October, once we've substantially hired all of our teachers and staff at the schools, is I look at all of the teachers and teacher assistants and instructional staff at the school. I take that total and I divide it by the total number, and then we multiply it by each school's amount, and they get an allocation that is sent to them, much like their school allocation. They may use it for teacher conferences, for teachers and instructional staff to go to conferences, or partially to go to conferences, depending on how they use it. And that's totally separate from the professional development that the district does as a whole. So you have to also remember, as Dr. Gordon was saying, we're saving the hotel bills and the travel bills and stuff by bringing people here, but you have to remember that what is there is just around town for meetings too. And we have really severely in the last 3 years cut back on itinerant travel, which is people that travel between buildings, because we have people in every building now based on what Dr. Gordon's plan has been to pull people in. We have ISS monitors in every single building. We have teachers that used to be split between buildings for chorus or band or orchestra, no longer have those things. And so they're not traveling every single day, getting money every single day for traveling between schools. So it's steadily gone down for those reasons.
it's not, this is not going to have any kind of effect on the teachers actually getting the training that they need. We have not decreased their training.
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's go over here. Dr. Buck?
I want to also ditto the thank you for what you all have done for your work. I want to say this because I think it's important to say to you publicly, since you stood here in another situation with another group of people. I want to apologize for what you experienced as you stood here before. And this is my opinion. I'm not speaking for anybody but me. And I've voiced my opinion to those who needed to hear it. It was uncalled for and unnecessary. The appropriation for this was done, the approval for this by the board was done, and I was glad that you explained that, Dr. Gordon, years ago when we got this grant. I believe I was chair when this was awarded, and I know that a remedy, Mrs. Forsman, was that the accountants that the city hired suggested that we have an escrow account when we had things that were on backlog that we couldn't get. Rather than having to go back and forth to ask for money to pay for those things that were on backlog, that we could put the monies in an escrow account and save them until those items came, and then we could go back and use them. So there was a remedy, so the whole thing was unnecessary, and I did want to start with an apology to you all for what you had to go through. I do want to say, as I look at this book and the work you've done, I have to ditto what the other board members have said. This is a stellar example of the kind of thing that we have and the kind of product that we have in Suffolk. And I do want to commend you for what you have done. since I've been through this experience quite a few times, I don't have a lot of questions, and you did answer my questions during the 2x2 sessions. I also want to say thank you very much, because I've been asking for early childhood education, as has Mrs. Byram, for a long time, and I'm glad we got to a point where we're able to implement that. And I'm really not surprised that when we opened the doors, we got 400 applications right away, because that is a need in this community. So I'm just thankful that we got that. Thank you again for your work and the work of the staff that work with you. As I look at the credentials of the people that we have on our administrative team, I can't help but be impressed that we have this much power together, this much intellectual power together to come up with the kinds of things that you do. So I'm not surprised at all, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Brenham?
Thank you. Like my counterpart, Board Member Slingloff, I am going to need to take some time to digest what was put in front of us today. But off the top of my head, I want to start with, I'm excited about the early childhood program. The research and the data that is out there, you know, as a SPED teacher, I know the sooner we can get to children and provide them the structure needed for academics to come eventually, the better. And so moving forward with expanding an early childhood program in Suffolk, I think is an admirable thing for us to do. My concern continues to be for the SPED program that we have here in Suffolk, and I see movements in the right direction, but I'm still concerned that, you know, we are not doing more. And I know that we only have the money that we have, and I understand that. And I know that we need to be good stewards over what we have. And so I would like to see more in our budget that addresses that category, just because looking at our assessments, we know these kids are struggling and they need more support and they need more quality instruction. And so that would be one of the areas that I would like to see a little bit more funding put towards. I'm curious about on the additional positions that talked about the review of SPED liaisons and SPED lead teachers to be announced. Those positions, are they full-time positions? Are they part-time positions? Are they 12-month employees? Are they 10-month employees? And how many more of these positions are we really looking at? Because the need is great. And if we have the ability to put more in that direction, I would, as a board member, be very supportive of being able to do something like that.
So Dr. Bradenham, you know, we actually agree on this. And right now we have 5 SPED liaisons. We just don't think that's enough. And part of the reason why I specifically put TBD on here, because if we do end up receiving additional funds on this new proposal that potentially may be a combination of the House and Senate's version, the additional funds that we're looking to add will go to special education. We've had conversation with Ms. Shirley about adding an additional SPED coordinator, because the total number of students is approximately 1,900 right now for our overall enrollment. And that doesn't include the increasing numbers of students that have 504 plans. When Ms. Forsman mentioned budget neutral, this potentially may mean a change in the total number of months that some of these other individuals is working. This is why we put SPED liaisons, SPED lead teachers, because we may do some changing of the titles so that we can get more bang for our buck with the overall allotments that we have. So with our focus that we have, we know that we have 2 schools that are under state monitoring for issues with students with disabilities. Dr. Branch's team has already been working with the Office of School Quality for that. We have to be able to share our school improvement plans. We have to show the data that supports what we're doing. And this was part of the reason why, you know, one of our elementary schools, Mac Ben, for example, has been under that, because even though they've made growth, they still haven't crossed that threshold. So if you take a look at our school quality report cards, our school quality profiles, you can see for all of our schools who's in level 1, level 2, and level 3, right?
Yes.
So the total number of years that they are in there is what determines that report coming from the Department of Education. So if you ever took a look at my office, the very first thing that I had on there for my budget initiatives that I wrote the first day of school was SPED instruction and support. So I have this on here as TBD because when we bring this budget back to you all for adoption, because by that time, we will know what the final budget is coming from the state, you will see an increase in the additional positions in that area. The total number is going to depend on the total number of additional dollars that we receive. Special education is going to be our focus.
So one more question. You mentioned the school improvement plans. I went to look at those online because they should be loaded online per school, and many of them were not current. So my question to you is, where might I be able to get my hands on that to see where those are at and what those look like?
So you on the DOE website or the SPS website?
SPS website. I went to the actual schools themselves where they actually supposed to post their school improvement plans, and many of them were outdated. They were
Yes.
not current.
Right, they're outdated because the quarterly reviews aren't done for this semester. So as soon as the quarterly reviews are done, then we upload them because the staff has to be able to give feedback to the principals and leadership teams. So they'll probably be uploaded within next week.
Because some of them were backdated to like 21, 22 was the last school improvement plan that I saw. Okay. Other than that, I'm sure I will have a few more questions. And Ms. Forsman, what you provided with the purchase services, I really appreciate the transparency there, but it does beg a few more questions. And if I might, I would like to send you some questions so that I can get some more clarification on those items.
We're actually going to ask Dr. Brittingham for all board members to send us any questions that you have by the close of business on March 8th. Ms. Jenkins has come up with the idea as a part of our March 14th agenda to actually have a school board discussion where we will, on the proposed budget, where we will address your questions during that time period. I don't know how much time Ms. Jenkins wants to allot for that, but we want to be able to have those questions in advance to be able to address those properly, and also that will give us 5 days to be able to research any answers in case things potentially may have also changed in the General Assembly by then. So for all of our board members here and Mr. Riddick online, March 8th by 4 o'clock, any questions that you all have for the budget, if you could send that to Ms. Forsman and I, and then when we're having the school board meeting on March 14th, we will publicly address each one of those questions.
So I'm going to be having a town hall next week, and any constituents that have questions related to the budget should do the same thing. They should send those questions through the portal that's been created.
Yeah, Ask a Budget Question is up and running. Ask a Budget Question went live at 5 o'clock when we started our presentation today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Vice Chair Howell?
Good evening. Thank you both for the time you put into preparing. I don't have questions about the presentation. Haven't looked through the notebook yet because I was listening to you, but my feedback is I'm especially thankful for, I think, slides 36 and the operational investments and on to have a comparison, what we did last year, what's increasing this year, and why. That's super helpful for me. These numbers are your language, and they're not mine. So when you break it down Barney style for me, like this is what we did last year, this is what we need this year, here's why, that's very helpful for me to understand where our increase or decreases are and why they're instructionally necessary. So I'm extra thankful you included that. That was helpful for me to translate.
In the book, at the end of the explanation of the program, it shows you every line that increased or decreased in the program. So if you look, for instance, on page 35, for general education, it shows you the 24-25 changes, the personnel changes and why, and then operation cost decrease and increase. Every single program shows you that.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
if you need to see that, you can see it there, and it gives you a short explanation. If you don't understand that explanation, please ask. But it should give you enough information so you understand why. If we've moved it from one line to the other, I say that we've moved it from one line to the other. If it's to do actual cost, I tell you it's actual cost. So I try to give you as much information on those piece, and anything that's changed in the book on those pages so that you have them for every program.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and thank you for the answers that you've given. Thank you for announcing, you said you were having a town hall, and when is it?
March 6th.
March 6th, where?
It is at the Holland Fire Station on O'Kelly Drive from 5:30 to 7 o'clock.
Okay. I will be having a town hall March 5th, which is Tuesday at Nansemond River High School in the auditorium from 6:30 to 8. Anyone else?
Vice Chair Howell and I will be having a town hall on March 12th, Tuesday evening at 6:30 p.m. at the Chuckatuck Volunteer Fire Department till 6:30 till 8ish. And I'm assuming you will ask Mr. Riddick as well.
Of course.
And I just want to add,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just want to remind the public that on Thursday, March 7, 2024, from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m., I will be having a town hall at Renee's Restaurant and Lounge, located at 156 West Washington Street, Suffolk, Virginia. If any citizens have any questions and they are unable to make it, they're more than welcome to email me directly their questions, and I will try to get back with them in a timely manner. The items that we will be discussing is the before Labor Day and after Labor Day start. We will be discussing school safety, bullying intervention and prevention. We will also open up for 24-25 school budget, as well as our 2024-2025 borough engagement plan. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity just to put the nugget out there that on Thursday, March 7th, we will be having our town hall at Renee's Restaurant and Lounge from 6 p.m. to 7:30. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to clarify, ours is a bit later than everyone else. That is on me. I'm heading out of town tomorrow for the next 9 days. So that was the soonest that I was available, but we will also be focusing on the budget and the school calendar. And if you have questions in the meantime that you want to send in advance, you can email either Kim or I. I will be available by email while I'm away.
Thank you. And I just want to encourage all of our board members to contact your councilman, city councilman, and let them know that we really need our budget approved. We need the money. Our auditor said that we have a A1 plus audit. So our people know what they're doing with the money, and it's for the students. Again, I'll say this again, it's for the students, it's for our staff, and it's to run a world-class school district. And we should all be proud of being a part of that. So please encourage your city councilman as well as your mayor to do what's necessary so we can continue to fund our schools. And we don't want anyone falling in sinkholes. And the sinkholes were not due to Suffolk Public Schools. Let's put that out there too. That's something that's always, I guess, with the land, that you're supposed to make sure that you're building on good soil. What we have to do to continue this great path upward and not try to pick every little thing, trying to find something when there is nothing. Please, thank you so much for coming. And is there anything else? Then this meeting is adjourned.